Kang Do-hoon was lying on his back under a broken reactor coil when the message came. His hands were black with engine grease. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. A piece of hot metal had burned a line across his forearm 20 minutes ago, and he had not even bothered to wipe the blood. He simply kept working, because the coil needed fixing, and nobody else on the ship knew how to do it as fast as he could. The ship was called the Jindo. It was not a warship. It was not beautiful. It was a deep space exploration vessel built by human hands and held together by human stubbornness. It creaked when it turned. The heating system only worked on the left side. The food printer made everything taste like warm cardboard. But it flew and it flew far, and that was enough. Do-hoon heard footsteps above him. Then a voice. "Ak, we have a transmission," said On Jisoo. She was standing with her arms crossed, looking down at him through the gap in the floor panel. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Jisoo was always sharp. She was his second-in-command and the best communications officer humanity had ever put on a ship. She was also the only person on the crew who could beat him at cards, and he respected her for that almost as much as everything else. "From who?" Do-hoon asked. He did not stop working. "The Valari Dominion." His hands paused for just a moment. Then they moved again. "Read it." Jisoo looked at the screen in her hand. "By the eternal light of Empress Yuna, sovereign of the 400 systems, keeper of the living throne, a mother of the Valari Dominion, the human envoy designated to speak for Earth is hereby summoned to the throne world of Solhari Prime. The Empress wishes to personally evaluate humanity's place within the galactic order. This is an honor beyond measure. Refusal is not expected." Do-hoon pulled himself out from under the reactor. He sat up, wiped his hands on his pants, and looked at Jisoo. "Refusal is not expected," he repeated. "That is what it says." "That is a strange way to invite someone." Jisoo did not smile. "It is not an invitation, Do-hoon. It is a command. And every species that has answered this kind of command has either bent the knee or disappeared. The Korath answered it 9 years ago. They are slaves now. The Pelori answered it before that. Nobody has heard from them since." Do-hoon stood up. He was not a tall man, and he was not wide or heavy. He had the kind of body that came from years of hard work and not enough rest. His face was weathered and plain, and his eyes were the color of dark coffee. There was nothing special about him at first look, but people who spent time with him always noticed the same thing. He never rushed, he never panicked, and he never, not once in his life, looked afraid. "Where is Tai-ho?" he asked. "Bridge." They walked together through the narrow hallways of the Jindo. The walls were dented and scratched. Someone had taped a photograph of a dog near the water recycler. Someone else had scratched the words "Earth or Nothing" into the metal above the airlock door. This was a human ship, and it looked like one. Captain No Tai-ho was sitting in his chair on the bridge, staring at the same transmission on the main screen. Tai-ho was older than Do-hoon by 15 years. His hair was gray at the sides, his jaw was square and hard, and his hands were thick with scars from a lifetime of service. He had fought in the border conflicts, survived the wreck of the Baekdu, and buried more friends than he could count. He did not speak often, but when he spoke, people listened. "You read it," Tai-ho said. It was not a question. "I read it," Do-hoon replied. "And? I am going." The bridge went quiet. Jisoo looked at Do-hoon like he had lost his mind. The navigation officer, a young man named Park Won-jin, turned in his seat with wide eyes. Even the ship seemed to groan, as if it disagreed. Tai-ho did not react. He just watched Do-hoon with steady eyes. "You know what they are," Tai-ho said. "Oh, I know. You know what they do to species that refuse them." "I know that too. And you know they did not invite you to talk. They invited you to kneel." Do-hoon met his captain's gaze. "Then they will be disappointed." Tai-ho studied him for a long time. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the engines and the soft beeping of the navigation console. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and endless, and somewhere beyond them, in a system far from Earth, a throne waited for a man who had no intention of bowing before it. Finally, Tai-ho nodded. "Just once." "Then go," the captain said. "But hear me, Do-hoon. Come back as a free man, or do not come back at all." Do-hoon understood. Those were not cruel words. They were the most respectful words a captain could give. They meant, "I trust you." Or they meant, I would rather lose you than see you on your knees." "Understood, Captain." He left the bridge and went to his quarters to prepare. There was not much to pack. A change of clothes, a small toolkit he always carried, emergency ration bars that tasted like dust but kept a man alive, a comlink device that Jisoo had modified to work on frequencies the Valari did not monitor, in a small photograph of a river back on Earth. He did not know why he always carried it. He had never lived near that river, but it reminded him of home in a way he could not explain. Jisoo was waiting by the shuttle bay when he arrived. She did not try to stop him again. She simply handed him a data chip. Every known Valari protocol, every public record of their military structure, every scrap of intelligence Earth has gathered in the last 4 years. It is not much, but it is something. Do-hun took it. "Thank you, Jisoo." She grabbed his arm. Her grip was strong. "Do not trust anyone in that palace, not the guards, not the servants, not even the ones who smile at you, especially not the ones who smile at you." He nodded. "And Do-hun? Yes? If you die on some alien throne world because you were too stubborn to kneel, I will never forgive you." He almost smiled. Almost. "I will keep that in mind." The shuttle was small and old, just like everything else humanity had. It rattled as it launched from the Jindo's Bay. Do-hun sat alone in the pilot's seat and watched the stars stretch into long lines as the shuttle jumped toward Villari space. The journey would take 14 hours. He spent the first hour reviewing the data Jisoo had given him. He spent the second hour eating a ration bar and staring at the photograph of the river. He spent the remaining 12 hours sleeping, because a man who could not control when he rested could not control anything at all. When he woke, the shuttle's viewport was filled with gold. Solhari Prime hung before him like a jewel made by gods. Its atmosphere shimmered with colors that had no name in any human language. Its surface was covered with structures so vast they were visible from orbit. Towers of crystal, bridges of light, cities that spread like veins of silver across the land. It was the most beautiful thing Do-hun had ever seen. It was also, he knew, a cage, the most beautiful cage in the galaxy. He guided the shuttle down through the golden atmosphere, and the palace of the Empress rose before him like a mountain made of glass and power. He took one long breath, then another. Then he opened the shuttle door and stepped out into the air of a world that wanted him on his knees. The air on Solhari Prime tasted like honey and metal. It was warm, almost too warm, and it pressed against Do-hun's skin like a living thing. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, just enough to make every step feel heavier. He noticed it immediately. He said nothing about it. A welcoming party stood at the base of the landing platform. 12 Velari soldiers in armor that looked like it was grown rather than built. Their skin was pale silver, their eyes were large and dark, and they stood perfectly still, like statues that could kill. At the front of them stood a figure taller than the rest, and broader across the shoulders with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then cracked in several places. Commander Hyuk. Do-hun had read about him on the data chip Jisoo had given him. Hyuk was the Empress's enforcer, her blade. He had crushed rebellions on 14 worlds. His left arm and half his chest had been replaced with Valari combat cybernetics, living metal that bonded with flesh and bone. He was fast, strong, and utterly loyal to the throne. He was also, according to every report Do-hun had read, completely without mercy. Hyuk looked down at Do-hun, the way a man might look at an insect that had wandered onto his dinner plate. "You are the human," Hyuk said. His voice was deep and flat. "I am. You are smaller than I expected. I hear that often." Hyuk did not smile. He turned and began walking. The soldiers formed a line on either side of Do-hun, and he understood without being told that he was meant to walk between them. Not beside them. Between them. Like a prisoner being escorted, not a guest being welcomed. He walked. The palace was beyond anything Do-hun had prepared himself for. The corridors were wide enough to fly a shuttle through. The walls were made of a material that shifted color as he passed, sometimes gold, sometimes deep blue, sometimes a shade of white that hurt to look at. The floors were smooth and warm beneath his boots. Everywhere he looked, there were carvings and murals showing the history of the Valari Dominion. Great battles, conquered worlds, species kneeling before thrones. He counted the murals as he walked. 14 different civilizations, all shown in the same position, on their knees, heads bowed. He memorized every corridor, every turn, every door. They walked for nearly 30 minutes before they reached the inner court. The doors were massive, carved from a single piece of dark crystal. They opened without sound, and inside Do-hun saw the court of the Empress for the first time. It was a room the size of a stadium. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into soft golden light. Hundreds of beings filled the space, aliens of every shape, size, and color, all dressed in fine clothing, all standing in careful positions that showed their rank. Some were tall and thin, with skin like polished wood. Others were short and round with too many eyes. A few had no visible form at all, just clouds of shimmering light that hovered in place. And every single one of them was watching him. Do-hun felt their eyes like weight on his chest. He kept walking. Hyuk stopped at the center of the court and turned. "You will be given quarters in the lower wing. The Empress will see you when she is ready. Until then, you will wait." "How long?" Do-hun asked. Hyuk's mouth twitched. It might have been amusement. "As long as the Empress decides." He left. The soldiers led Do-hun through more corridors. These ones narrower, darker, less decorated. The lower wing. They stopped at a door and opened it. Inside was a room with a stone bench, a small window that looked out onto a wall, and nothing else. No bed, no table, no food. "Your quarters," a soldier said. Do-hun looked at the room. He nodded and walked inside. The door closed behind him. He stood in the empty room for a moment, listening. When he was sure he was alone, so he reached into his coat and pulled out a ration bar. He ate it slowly, sitting on the stone bench. It tasted like dust and salt. He did not mind. He had eaten worse. Then he pulled out his toolkit and the modified comlink Jisoo had given him. He opened the toolkit and removed a small scanning device no bigger than his thumb. He had built it himself years ago from scraps of alien technology Earth had salvaged from a crashed trade ship. It was not powerful. Its range was short. But it could read energy signatures, shield frequencies, and structural compositions if he got close enough to the source. He pressed it against the wall of his room and began to scan. The first day passed. No one came. No food was brought. The window showed him nothing but the blank face of a wall. He slept on the stone bench and woke with a stiff back and cold hands. He ate another ration bar. He scanned more of the walls. He found 3 different energy conduits running behind the stone, power lines that fed the palace's shield generators. He recorded their frequencies. The second day, a woman came. She was Valari, or at least partly Valari. Her skin had the same silver tone, but it was darker, warmer, and her features were softer than the soldiers he had seen. Her eyes were large and deep brown, and she carried herself with the careful posture of someone who had spent her life trying to be invisible. "I am Shin Yunji," she said. "I have been assigned as your interpreter." "I speak the common trade language," Do-hun said. "I know. The interpreter role is a formality, and I am here to make sure you understand the protocols of the court." She paused. "And to make sure you do not do anything foolish." Do-hun studied her. There was something in her face, a tightness around the eyes, a slight trembling in her hands, that did not match her careful words. "You are afraid," he said. Yunji blinked. She had not expected him to say it so plainly. For a moment her mask slipped, and he saw the person underneath, tired, worried, and trapped. "I am careful," she said. "There is a difference. Sometimes, not always." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "The Empress collects pride," Yunji said. "That is what she does. She finds beings who carry themselves with dignity, and she breaks them. Not with violence, not always. She breaks them with patience. She makes them wait. She makes them hungry. She makes them feel small. And when they are weak enough, she offers them comfort. But only if they kneel. Every envoy who has come here has eventually knelt. Every single one." "I understand," Do-hun said. "Do you? Because the last one who tried to resist, a diplomat from the Korath Union, he lasted 5 days. On the 6th day, he broke. On the 7th, he signed away his people's freedom, and he wept while he did it." Do-hun was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What about your people, Yunji? Your mother's people? What happened after they knelt?" The color drained from her face. She did not answer. She did not need to. The silence told him everything. "I am sorry," he said, and he meant it. Yunji stepped back. Her mask returned, but it was thinner now. "Wana, the Empress will see you tomorrow. Be ready." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Without looking back, she said, "Do not let her take it from you. Whatever you have inside you that lets you sit in this empty room and eat dust and not complain, do not let her take it." Then she was gone. The third day came. Do-hun woke on the stone bench, ate his last ration bar, and pressed his scanner against the floor. He had now mapped the energy grid of the entire lower wing. He had recorded 14 different shield frequencies. He had counted the guard rotations. He had measured the response time of the security doors. All of it was stored on his comm link, waiting to be sent. He washed his face with water from a small tap in the corner of the room. He straightened his shirt. He could not do much about the grease stains or the burn on his arm, but he did not care about those things. When the soldiers came, he was standing. When they opened the door, he was ready. When they led him through the corridors toward the throne room, he walked the same way he had walked on the first day, straight, steady, looking ahead. The doors of the throne room opened, and golden light poured out like water. The court was full. Hundreds of eyes turned to him. The room was vast and heavy with a pressure he could feel in his chest, in his skull, behind his eyes. And there at the far end, sitting on a throne that seemed to be made of living light, was the Empress. Do-hun took his first step toward her. The throne room was designed to make anyone who entered it feel like nothing. Do-hun understood this the moment he stepped inside. The ceiling rose so high above him that it disappeared into a soft, golden haze. The walls curved inward like the ribs of some great beast, and the floor was polished to such a perfect shine that he could see his own reflection walking beneath him. Every surface, every angle, every beam of light was built for one purpose: to make the person standing in the center of the room feel as small as possible. And at the far end, raised above everything else on a platform of crystallized light, sat Empress Yuna of the Velari Dominion. Do-hun had prepared himself. He had read every description of her that existed in human records. He had studied photographs taken from long range by human spy drones. He had listened to audio recordings of her voice, captured during intercepted Velari communications. None of it had prepared him. She was beautiful in a way that did not feel real. Her skin was pure silver, flawless, as if she had been poured from liquid metal and shaped by careful hands. Her hair was long and white and floated around her shoulders like smoke in still air. Her eyes were black, not dark, not deep, but black, like two holes cut into the fabric of space. She wore a gown that moved on its own, shifting and flowing like a living thing, and the light around her throne bent toward her, as if even light itself could not resist her pull. She looked at Do-hun the way a mountain looks at rain. He walked forward. The court watched in total silence. He could feel them. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all holding their breath. He could feel something else too. A pressure. It started in his forehead and pushed downward, through his skull, into his jaw, down his spine, into his knees. It was not physical. It was something deeper, something that pressed on the mind itself. Velari psychic pressure. He had read about it. The Velari were naturally telepathic, and their royal bloodline carried a gift, or a weapon, that allowed them to project their will outward. In the presence of the Empress, that pressure was strongest. It was said that some envoys had collapsed before reaching the throne. Others had dropped to their knees without even deciding to. Their bodies simply gave in. Do-hun felt it. His knees wanted to bend. His back wanted to bow. A voice inside his skull, not his own, whispered that he was small, that he was brief, that he was nothing compared to the being before him, and his nose began to bleed. A thin line of red ran down his lip and dripped onto the polished floor. He wiped it with the back of his hand and kept walking. The court stirred. A quiet murmur ran through the crowd. The beings nearest to the aisle stepped back slightly, as if they were afraid of what might happen to the human who was still on his feet. Dahun reached the base of the platform. He stopped. He did not kneel. He did not bow. He stood with his hands at his sides and his eyes forward, and he looked up at the Empress the way a man looks at another person across a table. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the Empress smiled. It was a slow, careful smile, the kind a cat gives a mouse that has done something unexpected. "You are bleeding," she said. Her voice was soft. It came from everywhere at once. Hunit, not just from her mouth, but from the walls, the floor, the air itself. It wrapped around Dohun like silk. "I noticed," he said. "Most who stand where you stand are on their knees by now." "I am not most." Another murmur from the court. The Empress raised one hand and the room went silent instantly. "You are the human," she said. "Kang Dohun, engineer, envoy, a man of no royal blood, no noble title, no army and no empire. You come from a species that lives, what, 70 of your years? 80? You are children in the eyes of the galaxy, and yet you stand before me as if you belong here." "I was invited," Dohun said. The Empress tilted her head. The smile remained. "You were summoned. I heard you the first time." Something moved behind her eyes, not anger, not yet, something closer to curiosity. She leaned forward on her throne, and the pressure in the room increased. Dohun felt his teeth ache. His vision blurred at the edges, but he did not step back. "I have a gift for your people," the Empress said. "A generous offer. Earth will become a protectorate of the Valari Dominion. Your world will be placed under our protection. Your ships will be allowed to travel within our borders. Your people will serve in our labor fleets, contributing to the great work of the Dominion. And in return, no harm will come to you. No enemy will touch your world. No threat will reach your sky. You will be safe, Kang Dohun. All you must do is accept." Dohun listened. He let every word settle before he spoke. "What do you mean by labor fleets?" he asked. The court shifted, eyes widened, mouths opened slightly. No one questioned the Empress. No one asked for details. The offer was meant to be accepted, not examined. The Empress's smile thinned, but it held. "Your people would contribute workers to Valari projects across the Dominion. Mining, construction, manufacturing. It is honest work. And these workers would be free to leave?" Silence. "They would be serving the Dominion," the Empress said carefully. "That is not an answer." The smile disappeared. Not suddenly. It faded, like a light dimming. The room grew colder. "You are bold," the Empress said. "I am asking a simple question." "No, you are testing me, and that is a dangerous thing to do." Dohun let the silence sit. Then he asked another question. "How many species have accepted this offer?" "Many. All of them are grateful." "And the ones who refused?" The coldness in the room deepened. Commander Hyuk, who stood at the base of the platform like a shadow with fists, shifted his weight forward. The soldiers along the walls tightened their grips on their weapons. "There are no species that have refused," the Empress said. "There are only species that have not yet understood." Dohun nodded slowly. "I understand." "Then you accept?" "No. I understand what this offer really is." The room held its breath. "You are not offering protection," Dohun said. His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he used when explaining how a reactor worked. "You are offering ownership. You want my people to work in your mines and your factories, and you want them to call it an honor. You want Earth to give up its freedom, and thank you for taking it. That is not a partnership. That is not protection. Ah, that is slavery with a different name." The pressure in the room hit him like a wall. His knees buckled. His vision went dark at the edges. Blood dripped from his other nostril now, and he could feel his heart slamming against his ribs. The Empress had not moved, had not raised her voice, but the force of her will was crushing the air from his lungs. He locked his knees. He breathed through the pain. He stayed standing. The Empress looked at him with something that might have been admiration or might have been hunger. She leaned forward until her face was closer to his, and she spoke in a voice that was almost gentle. "You are bold for something so small," she said. "Kneel, and I will remember your courage fondly." The court waited, the soldiers waited. Commander Hyuk waited with his fist clenched. The entire palace seemed to lean toward this one moment. This one choice, this one man standing in a pool of his own blood, on the most beautiful floor in the galaxy. Do-hun wiped the blood from his face. He looked at the Empress. Not at her power, not at her throne, not at the empire behind her. He looked at her the way one person looks at another when they have made a decision that cannot be undone. "I think we are done here," he said. Then he turned around and walked toward the door. The court erupted. It was not a sound of anger. Not yet. It was a sound of shock, of disbelief so deep it came out as a gasp from hundreds of mouths at once. Beings who had lived for centuries, who had seen empires rise and fall, stood frozen in place because they had just witnessed something that had never happened before. A man had turned his back on the Empress. Do-hun did not look behind him. He walked the same way he had entered, straight, steady, looking ahead. His nose was still bleeding. His legs were shaking. His vision was blurred and the edges of the world were dark. But he was standing, and he was walking away. Behind him, the Empress sat perfectly still on her throne of light. She did not call out. She did not order his death. She watched him go with those black, endless eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt something she did not recognize. The doors closed behind him, and the sound echoed through the palace like a heartbeat. The doors of the throne room had barely closed when the chaos began. Inside the court, the noise was deafening. Voices overlapped in a dozen alien languages. Diplomats who had spent their entire careers in silence were shouting. Advisors rushed toward the platform. Commander Hyuk had already drawn his weapon, a long blade of dark metal that hummed with energy, and was moving toward the doors. "Let me take him," Hyuk said. His voice was flat, controlled, but his eyes burned. "Let me drag him back and put him on his knees where he belongs." The Empress raised one hand. The room went quiet as if the air itself had been cut. Hyuk stopped mid-step. The blade stayed in his hand, but he did not move. Yuna sat on her throne and stared at the closed doors. She had not moved since Do-hun had turned his back. Her face was still, unreadable, carved from silver in silence. The psychic pressure in the room had not lessened. If anything, it was stronger now, impressing against the walls like a storm with no wind. "No," she said. Hyuk's jaw tightened. "He insulted you. He insulted the Dominion. Before the entire court. I know what he did." "Then allow me to correct it." The Empress turned her black eyes to Hyuk, and the commander felt something cold move through his bones. He lowered his head, not because he wanted to, but because his body understood, even when his mind did not, that there were limits to what the Empress would tolerate. "He will not be touched," Yuna said. "Not yet. Return him to his quarters. Post guards. Let him sit. And then we wait. He is proud. But pride, Commander, is a fire, and every fire burns out if you give it nothing to feed on." Hyuk sheathed his weapon. He did not agree. Every instinct he had told him to end this now, to break the human and send the pieces back to Earth as a message. But the Empress had spoken, and her word was the only law that mattered. In the corridors of the lower wing, Do-hun walked between soldiers who no longer pretended to be escorts. They gripped his arms and pushed him forward. He did not resist. He let them take him back to the stone room with the small window and the empty bench. And when they shoved him inside and locked the door, he sat down and let out a long, slow breath. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of staying upright in that room. The psychic pressure had nearly broken him. His body ached in places he could not name, deep inside his skull, behind his eyes, in the center of his chest. He touched his nose. The blood had dried, but his head still throbbed. He had done it. He had refused. He had turned his back on the most powerful being in the galaxy and walked out of her throne room alive. Now came the hard part. He pulled out his comm link and checked the signal, still connected to the Jindo through the frequency Jisoo had programmed. "Good," he typed a short message. "Refused the offer, still alive, situation developing, stand by." He sent it and put the device away. Then he sat in the dark and waited. The hours passed, no food, no water. The guards outside his door changed once, but no one spoke to him. The room grew colder as the night cycle began. Do-hun lay on the stone bench and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the Empress. Not her power, not her beauty, not her threats. He thought about her eyes. There had been something in them when he turned away. Something she had tried to hide. Not anger. and something older, something like doubt. He filed that thought away. It might be useful later. Near midnight, or what he guessed was midnight, since no clock had been provided, the door opened quietly. Yunji slipped inside. She looked over her shoulder, then closed the door behind her. "You should not be here," Dohun said. "You should not be alive," and she replied, "and yet here we both are." She sat on the floor across from him. In the dim light of the window, her face was half shadow and half silver. She looked exhausted. "The court is in chaos," she said. "No one knows what to do. In 400 years, no envoy has ever refused. You did something that broke every rule they understand." "Good. It is not good. It is dangerous." She leaned forward. "Dohun, the Empress does not forgive. She does not forget. She has already begun to move." "What do you mean?" Yunji hesitated. Then she spoke. "She has ordered the 6th War Fleet to reposition. 600 warships. They are moving toward your solar system." The room seemed to shrink. Dohun felt the words like a punch to his chest, but his face did not change. He had trained himself long ago to keep his reactions inside, show nothing, give nothing away. "When?" he asked. "They are already moving. They will reach Earth's outer boundary within 4 days. It is not an attack. Not yet. It is a demonstration. She wants you to see what she can do. She wants you to understand the cost of your pride." Dohun was quiet for a long time. 600 warships. Earth's entire defense fleet had less than 80 ships, and most of them were old. If the Valari attacked, it would not be a war, and it would be an execution. "She thinks this will make me kneel," he said. "Will it?" He looked at her. "What happened to the Korath diplomat, the one who lasted 5 days?" Yunji's face tightened. "I told you, he broke on the 6th day. What broke him?" "The same thing. The Empress showed him a fleet above his homeworld. She told him that all he had to do was kneel, and his people would be spared. He looked at the ships hanging over his planet, and he fell to his knees and wept. And after he signed the treaty, the fleet did not leave. His people were put to work in the mines within a month. He was given a small room in the palace and a title that meant nothing. He died 3 years later. Some say from sickness, others say from shame." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. "She will do the same to Earth," Dohun said. And it was not a question. "Yes, whether you kneel or not, she will find a way to own your people. The only question is how much it will cost her and how much of your dignity you will have left when it is over." Dohun stood. He walked to the small window and looked out at the blank wall. Somewhere beyond that wall, beyond the palace, beyond the golden sky of Solhari Prime, 600 warships were burning toward his home. "Then it does not matter if I kneel," he said quietly. "If the result is the same, then the only thing I can control is how I face it." Yunji stood as well. She watched him with eyes that held a pain older than his species. "Why did you come here?" she asked. "Truly. You knew what she was. You knew what would happen." Dohun was silent for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Because someone needed to show the galaxy that it is possible to say no." His comm link buzzed. He pulled it out and read the message. It was from Jisoo. Her voice, transcribed into text, was tight with fear. "Dohun, there are 600 warships sitting outside Mars orbit." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were steady and clear. "Yunji," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "What?" "The palace security grid, the shield generators, the energy conduits that run through the walls. Do you know how they are controlled?" She stared at him. "Why?" "Because I have spent the last 3 days scanning everything I can reach. I have shield frequencies, power grid maps, and guard rotation patterns. But I am missing the command architecture. I need to know how the palace systems talk to each other." Yunji took a step back. Her face had gone pale. "If you are planning what I think you are planning, I am not planning an attack. I am not a soldier. I am an engineer." He held up his comlink. "I am planning to make sure that when the Empress comes for Earth, we are ready." The room was very quiet. Outside, the guards shifted their weight. Inside, 2 people from different worlds stood in a dark room and weighed the cost of what came next. Yunji took a breath, then another. Then she reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small, flat data disk. She held it in her palm like it was made of fire. "Command codes," she said. "Not all of them, but enough. I copied them years ago in case I ever needed to run." Do-hun looked at the disk. Then he looked at her. "If they catch you," he began. "If they catch me, I will die. I know. But my mother's people are already dead in everything but name. And if there is even a small chance that what you are doing will matter, then it is worth the risk." He took the disc. Their fingers touched for a moment, and he felt the slight trembling in her hand. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me yet," Yunji said. "Thank me when you are home." She slipped out the door and vanished into the dark corridor. Do-hun stood alone in the room, holding the data disk, and for the first time since he had arrived on Solhari Prime, he allowed himself a moment of something that might have been hope. Then he sat down and began to work. They came for him at dawn. The soldiers opened his door without knocking and stood in the corridor like a wall of silver armor. So Commander Hyuk was with them, his cybernetic arm gleaming under the pale morning light. He did not speak. He simply looked at Do-hun with those cold, empty eyes and jerked his head toward the corridor. Do-hun stood. He had not slept. He had spent the entire night working with Yunji's data disk and his own scanner, piecing together every fragment of information he had gathered over 3 days. Shield frequencies, power grid layouts, command architecture, guard rotations, weapon signatures. The energy output of the Valari war fleet, the structural weaknesses of the palace's defense network. All of it was now stored on his comlink, compressed into a single encrypted file, waiting on a frequency that no one on Solhari Prime was monitoring. He followed Hyuk through the corridors. The palace was quiet this morning. The usual crowds of courtiers and diplomats were gone. The halls were empty except for soldiers, and there were more of them than before. Do-hun counted as he walked. 32 between his quarters and the throne room. Double what it had been on his first day. They were afraid of him, not of his body, not of his strength. They were afraid of what he had done, because what he had done had no place in their understanding of the world. The throne room doors opened. The Empress was waiting. She sat on her throne of light the same way she had before, perfect and still, as if she had not moved since Do-hun had walked out. But the room was different now. The court was smaller. Only a handful of officials remained. The grand audience was gone. This was no longer a performance. This was a private conversation with sharp edges. And on the wall behind the Empress, stretching from floor to ceiling, was a live projection. Do-hun stopped walking. The projection showed space, deep, black, endless space. And in the center of it, hanging like a blue jewel against the dark, was Earth, his home. The oceans were bright and clean. The continents were green and brown, wrapped in white clouds. It was the most beautiful thing in the galaxy, and it had no idea what was coming. Because surrounding it, spread in a formation that covered hundreds of thousands of kilometers, were 600 Valari warships. They hung in the void like a ring of steel, their weapons dark but ready, their shields glowing with a faint golden light. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to turn a continent to glass. The Empress let him look, and she let the image sink into his mind, into his blood, into the part of him that was not an envoy or an engineer, but simply a man from Earth who wanted to go home. Then she spoke. "Beautiful, is it not?" she said. "Your world, so small, so fragile, so easy to love." Do-hun said nothing. "I do not wish to harm it," the Empress continued. "I have told you this. I am offering protection, not destruction. All you must do is accept. One word, Kang Do-hun. One small word, and those ships will become your shield instead of your end." She paused. The room was so quiet Do-hun could hear his own heartbeat. "Kneel," the Empress said. "Sign the treaty, and your world will be safe." The court watched. Hyuk watched. The projection of Earth filled the wall, and the warships around it glittered like teeth. Do-hun looked at the image of his home for a long time. He looked at the oceans he had never swum in, the mountains he had never climbed, the cities full of people he had never met but would die to protect. He thought about Jisoo on the Jindo, monitoring every signal, waiting for a word from him. He thought about Captain Taiho, sitting in his chair, trusting him. He thought about every human being alive, all 8 billion of them, none of whom knew that their future was being decided in a golden room on a world they had never heard of. Then he did something the Empress did not expect. He did not look at her. He did not kneel. He did not speak to the court or to the soldiers or to Commander Hayuk. He reached into his coat and pressed a button on his comlink, and he began to speak. "Captain Taiho," he said. His voice was calm, steady, in the same voice he used when giving engineering reports. "This is Do-hun. I am broadcasting on the open channel. I know you can hear me." The Empress frowned. Hyuk stepped forward, but she held up her hand. "For the last 3 days," Do-hun continued, "I have been scanning the palace of Solhari Prime. I have recorded the shield frequencies of the Valari defense grid. I have mapped the energy conduits that power their weapons. I have documented the command architecture of their military network and the structural layout of their fleet formations. Every piece of data I have gathered is now stored in a compressed file on the frequency Jisoo set up before I left." The room was frozen. The Empress's face was changing. Not slowly this time. The mask was cracking, and underneath it was something old and dangerous. "Amri, I'm sending that file now," Do-hun said. He pressed another button on the comlink. A small light blinked green. The data was transmitting. "Captain, when you receive this, broadcast it to Earth Command. Send it to every human outpost, every allied station, every neutral species with ears to listen. Let them know what the Valari are, how their weapons work, and how their shields can be broken." He lowered the comlink and turned to face the Empress. The silence that followed was the loudest sound Do-hun had ever heard. Yuna stood. She rose from her throne for the first time, and when she did, the light around her bent and cracked like glass under pressure. The psychic weight in the room tripled. Do-hun felt his bones groan. Blood poured from his nose, both nostrils now, and dripped down his chin. His knees screamed. His vision darkened. "What have you done?" The Empress's voice was no longer soft. It was not a whisper or a melody. It was a sound like a planet splitting open. Do-hun looked at her. Through the blood, through the pain, through the weight of a mind older and stronger than anything his species had ever faced, he looked at her and spoke clearly. "You invited me into your home," he said. "That was your mistake." Thousands of light years away, aboard the Jindo, Jisoo sat at her console and watched a data file appear on her screen. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Shield frequencies, weapon signatures, fleet formations, command codes, power grid maps, everything. Everything the Valari had kept secret for 4 centuries, delivered by one man with a scanner the size of his thumb and 3 days of patience. "Captain," she said. Her voice cracked. Taiho was already standing behind her. He had been standing there since Do-hun's voice had come through the speakers. "Send it," he said. "To Earth Command. To everyone." Jisoo's hands flew across the console. The data went out on every frequency the Jindo could reach. It traveled at the speed of light, bouncing off relay stations, slipping through communication networks, spreading like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, Earth Command had it. Within 2 hours, 3 neutral species had intercepted it. Within 4 hours, the entire galaxy was reading the military secrets of the Valari Dominion. Back on Solhari Prime, the Empress stood on her platform and felt something she had not felt in 400 years. It started in her chest and moved outward, cold and sharp, like a blade made of ice. Fear. And not of the human standing before her. Not of his bleeding nose or his shaking legs or his stubborn, infuriating refusal to fall. Fear of what he represented, a species that did not kneel, a species that, when trapped in a cage, did not rattle the bars. It studied the lock. Commander Hayuk drew his blade. "Give the order," he said. The Empress looked at Do-hun. He stood in a pool of his own blood, swaying slightly, pale and exhausted, and yet his eyes were clear and steady and utterly without regret. "It is already done," Do-hun said quietly. "You cannot take it back. The galaxy knows." The Empress's hands clenched at her sides. The light around her throne flickered and dimmed, and for one brief moment, none of the most powerful being in the galaxy looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had just lost control of something she could not get back. "Take him," she said. Her voice was cold, dead, emptied of everything but rage. "Take him and make him wish he had knelt." Hyuk moved forward with his blade raised, and Do-hun, for the first time, ran. Do-hun ran through the doors of the throne room and into the corridor beyond, and the palace came alive behind him like a beast that had been kicked awake. Alarms screamed through the halls. The golden light that filled every surface shifted to a deep, pulsing red. Doors that had been open slammed shut. Soldiers poured from side passages, their weapons drawn, their silver faces sharp with purpose. The entire palace was locking down, and at the center of it all, one human was running for his life. And he should not have stood a chance. The Valari were faster than humans. Their soldiers were trained from birth, enhanced with technology that made them stronger, quicker, and harder to kill. The palace was their ground, their design, their world. Do-hun was a guest-turned-prisoner-turned-fugitive, bleeding from his nose, exhausted from 3 days without proper food, and carrying nothing but a toolkit and a comlink. But Do-hun had spent 3 days studying this place. While the Empress thought he was sitting in a dark room waiting to break, he had been memorizing every corridor, every turn, every junction, every maintenance shaft and service tunnel and blind spot in the security grid. He had mapped the palace not like a diplomat studying his surroundings, but like an engineer studying a machine. And now he understood the machine. He turned left where the soldiers expected him to go right. He ducked into a service tunnel that ran behind the outer wall of the banquet hall. The tunnel was narrow and dark, built for maintenance workers, not for people. He had to crouch to fit, and the walls scraped against his shoulders as he moved. But the tunnel connected to a vertical shaft that dropped 3 levels, and at the bottom of that shaft was a maintenance corridor that ran directly to the outer ring of the palace. He climbed down the shaft. The metal rungs were cold and smooth, and his hands were slick with sweat and blood. Twice he almost lost his grip. He did not stop. Behind him, he could hear Commander Hyuk's voice barking orders. The sound carried through the walls like a blade through paper. Seal the lower levels. Check every maintenance access. He is an engineer. He will use the service tunnels. Hyuk was smart. Do-hun had expected that. But smart was not the same as fast, and Do-hun had a head start. He reached the bottom of the shaft and dropped into the maintenance corridor. The air here was cooler, thicker, and smelled like ozone and old metal. Pipes and conduits lined the ceiling, carrying power and data to every part of the palace. Do-hun ran through the corridor, counting doors as he passed them. 7, 8, 9. At the 12th door, he stopped. This was the junction he had identified on his second night, a point where the palace's internal security grid had a gap, a 3-second window between sensor sweeps where a section of corridor was unwatched. He had timed it with his scanner. He waited, counting in his head. 1, 2, 3. He moved through the gap and into the next corridor. No alarm sounded. No soldiers appeared. He allowed himself one breath of relief. Then he kept running. The outer ring of the palace was different from the inner halls. Less decorative, more functional. The walls were plain metal instead of shifting crystal. The floors were graded, not polished. This was where the real work happened. Power generation, shield maintenance, communication relays. The parts of the palace that guests were never supposed to see. His comlink buzzed. A message from Jisoo. 2 words. Coming in. Do-hun stopped running. He read the message again. Coming in. She was coming to Solhari Prime. She was flying a shuttle into the atmosphere of a hostile world surrounded by a war fleet and an empire that wanted him dead. He closed his eyes for 1 second. And then he typed back, landing platform 7, outer ring, 20 minutes. He did not have time to argue with her. He did not want to. Jisoo had made her choice the same way he had made his. And if there was one person in the galaxy he trusted to fly a shuttle through impossible odds, it was her. He started running again. Landing platform 7 was on the far side of the outer ring, near the base of a tower that housed secondary shield generators. To get there, he had to pass through a section of corridor that connected to the main guard barracks. There was no way around it. He would be seen. He reached into his toolkit and pulled out 2 items, a small electromagnetic pulse charge he had built from scavenged parts during his second night, and a length of insulated wire. The charge was weak. It would not take down a ship or disable a building, but it could disrupt electronics within a 10-meter radius for about 4 seconds. 4 seconds of darkness in a corridor full of sensors and automated doors. He set the charge at the junction and ran. The pulse went off behind him with a soft, flat sound, like a hand clapping once. The lights in the corridor died. The sensor panels went dark. The automated doors froze in their open positions. And Dohan sprinted through the barracks junction before anyone inside had time to understand what had happened. 4 seconds. He made it in 3. The corridor beyond was empty. He could see the entrance to landing platform 7 ahead. A wide door with a status panel glowing green. Unlocked. He pushed through it and stepped out onto the platform. When the sky above Solhari Prime was still golden, but darker now, streaked with red from the alarm lights that pulsed across the palace exterior. The wind was warm and smelled of something sweet and alien. The platform was empty. No ships, no soldiers. Not yet. He heard footsteps behind him. Heavy, fast, metal on stone. He turned. Commander Hyuk stood in the doorway. His blade was drawn. His cybernetic arm was glowing with charged energy, the living metal bright and hot. His chest heaved with exertion, and there was a dark fury in his eyes that went beyond duty or loyalty. This was personal now. "You cannot run," Hyuk said. "There is nowhere to go. Your ship is beyond the atmosphere. And even if your pilot is foolish enough to come, she will be destroyed before she breaks orbit." Dohan stood on the edge of the platform and faced him. But he had no weapon. He had no armor. He had a toolkit and a comlink and a body that was running on nothing but willpower and emergency rations. "Then I suppose we have a problem," Dohun said. Hyuk moved first. He was fast. Faster than Dohun had expected. Faster than anything human. The blade came in low, aimed at Dohun's legs, meant to cripple rather than kill. The Empress wanted him alive. Hyuk was following orders, even in his rage. Dohun jumped back. The blade missed his knee by a finger's width. He stumbled, caught himself, and moved again as Hyuk swung a second time. The cybernetic arm followed the blade with a punch that cracked the air where Dohun's head had been a moment before. He could not win this fight. He knew that. Hyuk was stronger, faster, better armed. Every second Dohun spent trying to match him was a second closer to death. So he did not try to match him. He watched, the way an engineer watches a machine. Hyuk's cybernetic arm moved in patterns. Every swing, every strike, every motion followed a sequence that was programmed into the living metal. Fast, efficient, deadly, but programmed. And programmed things had inputs. Dohun reached into his toolkit as he dodged another strike. His fingers found what he was looking for. A Valari power cell he had taken from a broken light fixture in his quarters on the first night. It was small, barely the size of his fist, and it held a charge meant to power a lamp for a year. Hyuk lunged. Dohun ducked under the blade and stepped inside the commander's reach. For one heartbeat, they were face to face. Close enough that Dohun could see the scars on Hyuk's jaw and the cold hatred in his eyes. Dohun jammed the power cell into the joint where Hyuk's cybernetic arm met his shoulder. The effect was immediate. The power cell discharged its full load directly into the cybernetic system. Sparks erupted from the joint. The living metal seized, locked, and then went dead. Hyuk's arm dropped to his side like a stone weight, pulling him off balance. His blade clattered to the platform floor. Hyuk roared, a sound of pain and shock and fury, and swung his remaining fist at Dohun's face. It connected. Stars exploded behind Dohun's eyes. He staggered backward, tasting blood, and his vision went white for a terrible moment. But Hyuk was off balance, weighed down by a dead arm, and before he could recover, Dohun kicked the blade off the edge of the platform and stepped back. Hyuk fell to one knee. His cybernetic arm hung useless, sparking and twitching. He looked up at Dohun with pure disbelief. "You are nothing," Hyuk whispered. "You are an insect." "Maybe," Dohun said. He spit blood onto the platform. "But this insect is still standing." A sound cut through the sky. The roar of engines, human engines, loud and rough and beautiful. Dohun looked up and saw a shuttle tearing through the golden atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke, its hull scorched and dented. It was the ugliest thing he had ever seen, and it was the most welcome sight of his life. Jisu's voice crackled through his comlink, broadcast on all Valari frequencies for the entire planet to hear. "This is the human ship Jindo. We are taking our man home. Hurry, get in the way and find out what humans do when they are angry." The shuttle slammed onto the platform with a sound like thunder. The rear hatch opened. Jisoo was in the pilot seat, her face lit by red warning lights, her hands steady on the controls. And beside the hatch, already reaching out her hand, was Unji. She had made her choice. Do-hoon ran. Behind him, Hyuk tried to rise, but his dead arm pulled him down. Soldiers burst through the corridor door, weapons raised. The first shots hit the platform where Do-hoon had been standing a second before, melting the stone into glowing slag. He grabbed Unji's hand. She pulled him inside. The hatch closed. "Go," Do-hoon said. Jisoo did not need to be told twice. The shuttle lifted off the platform in a storm of heat and noise, and then they were climbing, punching through the golden sky, Wara the palace shrinking below them, the alarms fading into silence. Do-hoon looked through the rear viewport as Solhari Prime fell away. The palace was a speck of light on a world of gold, and somewhere inside it, an Empress stood at a window and watched him leave. He turned away from the glass and sat down on the floor of the shuttle. His nose was bleeding again. His jaw was swelling where Hyuk had hit him. His hands were shaking. Yoonji sat beside him. She was trembling too, but she was smiling. "You are insane," she said. "I have been told." Jisoo's voice came from the cockpit. "We are clear of the atmosphere. The Jindo is waiting at the jump point. We have about 6 minutes before their fighters catch us." "Then fly faster," Do-hoon said. And she did. The Jindo was waiting at the jump point, woody drifting in the cold dark between stars like a scarred old dog, waiting for its owner to come home. Its hull was pitted with micro-asteroid damage. One of its communication arrays was bent at an odd angle. The heating system still only worked on the left side, but its engines were warm, its shields were up, and Captain No Taiho was standing on the bridge with his arms folded and his eyes fixed on the viewport. "Contact," said Park Wonjin from the navigation console. His voice was tight. "One shuttle, human signature, coming in fast, very fast." "That is Jisoo," Taiho said. "She is being followed. I am reading 18 Valari interceptors on her tail. They are gaining." Taiho did not blink. "Open the bay doors. Charge the jump drive." "Sir?" "The jump drive needs 90 seconds to cycle." "Then she has 90 seconds. Jisoo's shuttle screamed toward the Jindo like a stone thrown at the sky. Behind it, the Valari interceptors were closing the gap, their weapons charging, their formations tightening for the kill. They were faster than the shuttle. They were armed. They were angry. And they were going to reach firing range in less than a minute. Inside the shuttle, Jisoo flew the way she did everything, with total focus and absolutely no patience for anything that got in her way. Her hands moved across the controls with the speed of a musician playing an instrument she had known her entire life. The shuttle rolled, dipped, and accelerated in ways that should have torn it apart. But Jisoo knew this machine the way Do-hoon knew reactor coils. She knew exactly how far she could push it before it broke. Do-hoon sat in the back with his hands braced against the wall. Yoonji was beside him, gripping a support bar, her silver face pale and tight. The shuttle shook so hard his teeth rattled. 30 seconds to the bay, Jisoo called from the cockpit. "They are going to fire before we reach it. Can you dodge?" "I have been dodging for the last 4 minutes, Do-hoon. I am running out of directions." The first shot hit the shuttle's rear shield. The impact threw Do-hoon against the wall. Warning lights flashed. A crack appeared in the hull plating above his head. The second shot missed by meters, burning a line of bright green across the viewport. 20 seconds, Jisoo said. Her voice was steady. She was not going to panic. She had decided that a long time ago. The Jindo's bay doors opened like arms reaching out. Taiho watched from the bridge as the shuttle streaked toward them, trailing smoke, its shields failing, the Valari interceptors right behind it. "Wonjin," Taiho said. "The moment that shuttle is inside, close the doors and jump. The drive is still cycling. Override it." "Sir, if we jump before the drive is fully cycled, we could lose the rear section of the ship." Taiho looked at the young navigator. His face was calm, his voice was quiet, and his eyes held the kind of certainty that came from 30 years of making decisions that no one else wanted to make. "Then we lose the rear section. Jump." The shuttle hit the bay at an angle that left a trail of sparks across the floor. It slid, spun, and slammed into the far wall with a crash that shook the entire ship. Till the bay doors closed. The Velari interceptors pulled up at the last second, their weapons firing into the Jindo's rear shields. And then the jump drive fired. The stars stretched into lines. Space folded. The Jindo leaped forward and vanished from Velari space in a flash of white light, leaving nothing behind but empty dark and 18 interceptors with no target. On the bridge, Taiho gripped the arm of his chair as the ship groaned and shuddered around him. The lights flickered. Something deep in the engine room made a sound like breaking glass. The rear section held, barely, and the ship stabilized as the jump smoothed into a steady stream. They were out. They were free. Taiho closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he opened them and pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, the envoys aboard. We are heading home. In the shuttle bay, Jisoo climbed out of the wrecked shuttle and sat on the floor. Her hands were shaking now. She let them shake. Do-hoon came out after her, limping, bleeding from his nose and from a cut on his forehead where he had hit the wall during the landing. Eunji followed, silent and wide-eyed, looking at the human ship around her, as if she could not believe any of it was real. Jisoo looked at Do-hoon. He looked at her. "You flew into the atmosphere of a hostile planet to pick me up," he said. "Yes. On all Velari frequencies. I wanted them to hear." He sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Do-hoon reached into his coat and pulled out the photograph of the river. It was creased and stained with blood, but it was whole. He looked at it and let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of everything he had been holding since he first stepped onto Solhari Prime. "Let us go home," he said. 6 months later, the galaxy was a different place. The Velari war fleet had withdrawn from Earth's solar system 4 days after Do-hoon's escape. Not because the Empress had shown mercy — mercy was not a word she understood — but because the math had changed. Do-hoon's data had been broadcast to every corner of known space. Earth's defense network, rebuilt using Velari shield frequencies and weapon signatures, was no longer a collection of old ships and hopeful engineers. It was a targeted, precise, and dangerous system built by people who now understood their enemies' machines as well as their own. And it was not just Earth. The neutral species, the ones who had spent centuries sitting on the edges of Velari space, too afraid to speak and too proud to kneel, had received the data too. For the first time, they had what they needed to build real defenses. For the first time, the cost of Velari aggression was not zero. The Empress could still win a war against humanity, but it would not be quick, it would not be clean, and it would not be quiet. And for a ruler who had built her empire on the myth that resistance was impossible, a loud, messy, costly war was the one thing she could not afford. So the fleet withdrew, and the galaxy noticed. The story spread the way all great stories spread, not through official channels or news networks, but through whispers, through cargo pilots sharing drinks at refueling stations, or through engineers swapping data files in back rooms, through children on occupied worlds telling each other about the human who walked into the Empress's throne room and walked out again with his head up and his back straight. They called it different things in different languages: the refusal, the walk, the day the Empress blinked. But the meaning was always the same. It was possible to say no. It had been done. A small, short-lived species from a little blue world had proven it. Eunji was granted protection on Earth. She lived in a small apartment near the sea, and she spent her days working with human diplomats, teaching them what she knew about Velari culture, Velari weaknesses, and the dozens of species still living under the Dominion's control. She spoke freely now, without fear, and her words reached places the Empress had tried to keep silent. Captain Tejo submitted his mission report to Earth Command. It was 1 line long. Envoy returned. Dignity intact. The admiral who received it read it 3 times, then put it in a frame on his wall. Jisoo was promoted to Chief Communications Officer of the New Earth Defense Network. She accepted the position on one condition: that she could keep flying the Jindo on the side. The condition was granted. She still flew the old ship on weekends, alone, through quiet corners of space where the stars were thick and the silence was clean. And Do-hoon. Do-hoon was given a title he had never asked for: Senior Diplomatic Officer of Earth's External Affairs. It was a big title for a man who still preferred to fix engines with his bare hands. He accepted it because someone had to. And because he understood something that most people did not, that diplomacy was not about words or treaties or ceremonies. It was about standing in a room with someone more powerful than you and choosing not to look away. On a warm evening, 6 months after his return, a message arrived at Earth's diplomatic office. It came from the Galactic Cooperative Council, a body of neutral species that had, until now, treated humanity as a footnote. The message was an official invitation, not to serve, not to kneel, not to join as a junior partner or a protectorate or a resource to be managed, an invitation to join as an equal. The ambassador who delivered the message was a tall, thin being with 4 arms and eyes like liquid gold. He met Dohun in a simple conference room with plain walls and bad coffee, and he asked the question that half the galaxy had been asking for months. What made you think you could defy her? Dohun was quiet for a moment. He thought about the stone bench in the empty room. He thought about the blood on the polished floor. He thought about Yunji's trembling hand and Jisu's steady voice and Taiho's one-line report. He thought about the photograph of the river, still creased and stained, still in his coat pocket, still reminding him of a home he would never stop fighting for. Then he smiled. It was a small, tired, honest smile. The kind of smile that belonged to a man who had been through something terrible and come out the other side not stronger, but still whole. I did not think I could, he said. I just knew I would not kneel. Far away, on a throne world of gold and crystal, the Empress sat alone. Oh, the court was empty. The lights were dim. She replayed the moment in her mind, the human turning his back, the doors closing, the silence that followed. And she felt the cold edge of a truth she had spent 400 years avoiding. Power was not the ability to make someone kneel. Power was standing in front of someone who could destroy you and choosing to remain on your feet. She had ruled the galaxy for centuries. She had broken empires. She had crushed rebellions. She had collected the pride of 100 species and displayed it like trophies on her walls. But she had never, not once, encountered something she could not break. Until now. The Empress closed her eyes. The golden light of Solhari Prime flickered around her, and for the first time in a very long time, the silence in the throne room was not the silence of obedience. It was the silence of something ending. And somewhere on a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy, a man with engine grease on his hands sat on a bench by a river and watched the water move. And he did not think about empresses or thrones or the weight of stars. He just breathed, and that was enough.